Welcome to The Explainer. Now, when a lot of folks think about pig farming, they just picture muddy fields and, traditional agriculture. But today, we're throwing that stereotype out the window. We are talking about mastering the pig farming enterprise. If you treat this like a serious, rigorous corporate startup from day one, it can literally yield incredible returns. So, let's get into it. Okay, let's dive into this. Here is your zero to hero blueprint for today. First, we'll cover planning your pig empire. Then, housing and feeding fundamentals. After that, we'll get into health, breeding, and records. And finally, maximizing profits while minimizing mistakes. All right, part one, planning your pig empire, the foundation. Remember, before you even think about buying a single pig, you have got to think like a startup founder. Look, a solid business plan is absolutely crucial. It's your ultimate shield against financial loss. You need to map out the exact number of starting pigs, your strict housing requirements, and of course, your feeding costs. Plus, you've got to factor in veterinary expenses, nail down your marketing strategy, and clearly calculate your expected profits right out of the gate to protect that initial capital. No winging it here. Now, what's really interesting about this is how your choice of breed dictates your entire business model. You're basically acquiring specific genetic assets. Need a fast-growing, highly productive engine? The large white pig is your go-to. Looking for an excellent mother to ensure piglet survival? That's the Landrace. The Duroc brings a solid growth rate combined with top-tier meat quality, while the Hampshire, well, that's your efficiency expert, totally prized for lean meat and incredible feed conversion. Moving right along to part two, housing and feeding fundamentals, daily operations. This is where we transition from setup to the daily grind. Imagine the difference between a high-end facility and a complete disaster zone. Your infrastructure is definitely not the place to cut corners. Ideal housing strictly demands protection from the elements, flawless ventilation, and totally separate pens for piglets, growers, and breeding stock. If you end up in a disaster scenario with cramped, dirty housing, well, you aren't saving money. You are practically guaranteeing immediate disease outbreaks and slower growth. Now take a look at this number, 60 to 80%. Seriously, let that sink in for a second. A massive 60 to 80% of your entire production cost is going directly into feeding your pigs. This is exactly where the real money is either made or completely lost. Mastering your feed, that is mastering your bottom line. Because feed is such a huge expense, precision is everything. You've got to balance energy sources like maize and cassava with protein sources like soybean and fish meal, and then top it all off with vitamins and minerals. On the flip side, what should you avoid? Moldy feed is toxic. Sudden feed changes will completely wreck their digestion, and overfeeding or underfeeding destroys that 60 to 80% cost efficiency we just talked about. Perfectly balanced feeds are strictly non-negotiable. Okay, part three, health, breeding, and records, protecting the asset. This right here is the absolute core of operational risk management. Disease prevention is cheaper than treatment. It sounds simple, right? But it's literally the golden rule of livestock management. Treating sick pigs drains your profit margins so fast. Instead, make those crucial upfront investments. Vaccinate, strictly quarantine any new pigs, clean those pens routinely, and aggressively control pests. To keep on top of prevention, you need a daily monitoring system. If you see a loss of appetite, hear coughing, spot diarrhea, detect a fever, or notice slow growth, act immediately. Seriously, don't wait. Call a vet the absolute second you notice these signs so you can stop a minor issue from turning into a massive farm-wide outbreak. And this brilliantly illustrates the sheer potential we're talking about. 18 to 24. That is the incredible number of piglets a single, highly productive, well-managed sow can produce every single year. When you manage breeding the right way, your healthy stock basically becomes a literal multiplication engine for your business. But to hit those high numbers, you've got to follow a strict life cycle of breeding management. First, mate your healthy stock and accurately record those dates. Second, closely monitor the pregnancy. Third, don't wait until the last minute. Get those farrowing pens prepared well before delivery. And fourth, make sure to provide extra, specialized care for the newborns. Meticulous attention to this cycle is what yields those huge production jumps. Now, how do you actually know if all this hard work is making you money? Essential record keeping. You absolutely have to track feed purchases, medication costs, birth dates, mortality rates, your sales, and all your breeding information. Good records are really the only objective way to figure out exactly what's highly profitable and what's bleeding your enterprise dry.
All right, the final stretch, part 4, maximizing profits, minimizing mistakes, the payoff. We've reached the ultimate goal here.
Look, you didn't raise all these pigs just to hang out with them. You raised them to sell. Your strategic sales targets need to be focused. We're talking wholesale to pork processors, contracts with restaurants and hotels, supplying local butchers, or even selling straight to individual consumers. Targeting these specific buyers, especially during periods of high demand, is your biggest lever for driving up profits. So, let's tie it all together and contrast what works with what fails. The keys to success: quality stock, proper housing, super efficient feeding, strict disease control, strong marketing, and continuous learning. That's your ticket to a steady, lucrative income. On the other hand, the common mistakes will sink you. Starting way too large, buying poor stock, ignoring your records, underestimating those feed costs, and having zero marketing plan. Avoid those at all costs. We've covered the business planning, the genetics, the housing, the absolutely critical feed economics, health management, and marketing. You now have the complete, objective blueprint for a highly profitable agricultural enterprise right in front of you. The knowledge is yours. So the only question left is, you have the blueprint. Are you ready to build your enterprise?